Hello, my name is Em. This is our channel, Life with All of Us. Thank you for stopping and hanging out with us today. So today I wanted to talk about rescuing wildlife. So I wanted to talk about the do's, the don'ts, and the only time that you should ever take wildlife out of the wild. So I figured I would throw some knowledge at you that is probably going to shock a lot of people, but you cannot give an animal a better life than they have in the wild. That is their environment. That is where they thrive. That is where they belong. Now, I know a lot of people will see an injured animal or a sick animal and they want to keep that animal. However, chances are you don't properly know how. Now, if you find a sick or injured animal or a baby, the best thing to do is call a wildlife rehab in your area. Now, it's best to have these numbers on hand. There's usually a few. I live in Michigan, the city I live in. We have a couple. We don't really have a ton, but we have a couple. You call the rehab, you want to give them as much information you have about the animal that you have come across. Now, it's best to stay there while you talk to the rehab so that you don't actually have to remove the animal unless absolutely necessary. You always want to take pictures. Like I said, give as much information to the wildlife rehab as possible, and then they can better tell you if you should keep the animal there or if they need to be brought in for further care. Now, if you have to leave the area with the animal, if you can't get a hold of a rehab right away, make sure you know exactly where you found that animal so that you can place them back if they do not need further care from a rehab. I have been rescuing animals since I was a little baby girl. I have always loved animals. I will get into that in another video. However, I've been rescuing baby mice since I was a kiddo. So we always seem to find baby mice that were abandoned. We would leave them out for their mom. Sometimes she came back, sometimes not. So I would always feed them from a little Ziploc bag with a teeny tiny little cut at the end with some sugar milk. That was, 30 years ago. So things were not as, there wasn't as much information as there is now. But I loved rescuing babies. Mice have always been one of my favorite animals. But recently what made me think to do this video is I just rescued both a skunk and a rabbit a week apart. Now, the rabbit was a little guy, I think she was a girl, that my husband found on our farm. And so I called the rehab. They wanted a picture and they wanted to know if his eyes were open to see if they were old enough to live on their own. So we did that, and they did think that he was a little too small to stay on his own. So I brought her over. I keep saying he and she, either way. I brought her over to the rehab, and then they took care of her from there. So I did what was right. I called the company. I called the rehab. I asked what their thoughts were. Otherwise, if he was big enough, I would have left him out there, and he could have, lived his life as planned. The skunk was a little different of a situation. Here in Michigan, we are not allowed to rehab skunks or bats due to the possibility of rabies. However, you will find people with bleeding hearts that will help skunks and bats because otherwise they just die, and that sucks. We want to keep these animal populations thriving. So I did find a place for the skunk. My cousin had called me. This little baby skunk was abandoned by her porch. We had a lot of rain in Michigan, and they think that the family lived under their deck and it got flooded, and so the family kind of dispersed. They did leave the baby overnight and next to the porch where they had originally found him, and the mama never came back, unfortunately. So I called around. Some rehabs wouldn't take him, but I did find one that would. I was so happy because I thought, I do not know how to care for a skunk. I'm not going to let him die, but I just don't have the proper knowledge of this. Unfortunately, he wasn't doing good. He was losing control of his faculties. faculties. And so he kept spraying, which was just natural. He wasn't trying to. In fact, he wasn't even old enough to be able to do that on his own. But I brought him in. They were going to throw an IV on him and get him on a warm heat pad and see what they could do for him. They do say that a lot of the babies that they find it's from hypothermia, that they're not doing good. So again, I called the rehab. I asked what was going to, what they could do, what my options were. So I'm actually going to link a link in the description for a petition that can be signed so that Michigan can actually rehab skunks. I don't believe the petition includes bats at this point, but I know the rehabs around here would love to rehab skunks. They're just as important as any other animal. So if you guys could sign that, that would be amazing. I would love it. Now, a while ago at my old house, my dog found a baby possum. And of course I want to keep him because he's cute, but I know better. So put him on, I did some research. This was probably a good 15 years ago. So again, there wasn't as much research, as much knowledge as there is now. However, I warmed up rice in a sock, put him on that, got him some liquids, and got him to a rehab. I think I had him overnight before the rehab got back to me. But it's great to help out animals, but it's also very, very, very important to know if an animal does have to actually be rehabbed. Now, a lot of people find baby birds on the ground and they pick them up, they bring them to a rehab. The problem with this is that these birds most likely have fledged, which means they've left the nest. They've left the nest. They can use their wings. However, they are still dependent on their parents for food. They are in a vulnerable position during this time, but this is just life. This is their life cycle. And if people are constantly bringing in babies that don't actually need the rehab, then they're too full for when there's serious cases, and then they may have to turn them away. So it's important, so important to make sure and call a wildlife rehab, and to not also take it upon yourself to care for these animals, especially if they don't need it. Now, one of my neighbors a few years ago had brought over a fledged baby bird. He did have Asperger's, so he was not aware. He couldn't remember where he found this bird. So unfortunately, I was not able to bring the bird back, and I had no choice but to bring them to a rehab. I had called them, of course, and spoke with them, and they said go ahead and bring him in. So in situations like that, you really don't have a choice. I tried to explain to him, next time come to me, and then we'll go together and see where this bird is, and I can kind of assess the situation better. Again, I'm not like a professional by any means. I just know the people to call and the proper way to go about things. Now, the only wildlife rescue that I have is a painted turtle that my neighbors took out of the wild as a baby and then kept in like a 3-gallon tank for 5 years. So we have 47 animals, so we love to travel. When we are out of town, we have a sitter that comes and stays in home. And she loves all animals, but she cannot watch snakes. She doesn't know what her fear is all about, why she has it, but she does have a fear of snakes. She respects them, but she just can't watch them. So our snakes go to our neighbor's house. And I was dropping them off one time before a vacation, and they said, "Oh, do you want a turtle?" And turtles are my favorite animal of all time, so I was like, probably. And they thought that was kind of funny because they were just they didn't think that I would actually take this turtle. But I saw the conditions in which she was living, and I was super sad, so I had no choice. I mean, I love turtles anyway, so when I got back from vacation, I got a whole setup for him. He was in a 3-gallon tank. He was actually unable to fully get out of the water and bask. He could only get up and be vertical, which sucked. He did have a light. I'm not sure if it was heat or UVB or both or neither. I really don't know what it was. However, he looks amazing. He is stunted. He should be bigger. He doesn't have a lot of shell issues. He doesn't look like he has metabolic bone disease. He looks really good for the situation in which he was in. So I got him a 40-gallon stock tank. I love stock tanks instead of fish aquariums because they can't see out and they won't just pace back and forth trying to get out. I have 2 filters on it. I actually got him 2 silverfish that were like super small for him to eat, and he became best friends with them, and now they're like big. So they actually work out really well as like, you know, a cleanup crew, which who would have thunk, but it is what it is. I appreciate it. I made a huge basking area. I got the idea off Snake Discovery actually. And so he can come out whenever he wants. It's large area, so he loves that. He is just the best person ever. He is amazing. He knows he is just a handsome little devil. I love him so much. I will put pictures in. Hopefully I can get a little video. I can add that at the end. So that is personally the only wildlife rescue I have, which I didn't even rescue out of the wild. He didn't need to be rescued, so it's kind of crappy because people do it all the time, especially with turtles. They'll do it with toads and frogs and bugs and, you know, all kinds of stuff. And it's really upsetting because this turtle, who I named Tortle, because I mean, he's too dignified for any other name. I mean, he's perfect. He's too good for a name. So, you know, obviously living in the wild is the best place for him and for any wild animal, unless it's like imminent death, basically. I mean, you know, people will go herping and they will pick up animals and they will do all that. I don't love that idea. I think that that's very stressful for an animal. It can be very confusing for an animal. You're picking them up, taking them out of their environment, even for just a minute. I don't know, I'm kind of like back and forth with that. It's what it is. As long as you're putting them back right where you got them within like seconds or minutes, I mean, I guess it's probably not the end of the world, but I'm not a fan of it. So yeah, today my whole message is please, 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 as awesome as they are and as fun as it seems, don't take animals out of the wild for personal pets. Like, just don't do it. There's so many breeders, they are so overbred. I mean, literally reptiles, amphibians, dogs, cats, I mean, pretty much most domesticated animals, if not all, are severely overbred, which will be another video because I don't want to get into it today. But there's plenty of resources to get captive bred. I'm gonna leave you guys with that today. I think I've rambled long enough. I hope that you got some information from this or can pass this on to a friend. But wildlife is meant to be in the wild, okay? Keep those babies where they belong. And please, actually, yes, please sign the petition in the description. That would be awesome. And I really appreciate you guys coming out. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much. Bye.